May 29th, 1453. The Theodosian walls have stood for over 1,000 years. Nothing has ever broken them by force. Tonight, that's about to change. Twice. Once by an Ottoman army of roughly 80,000 men and the largest cannon ever built, and once by 200 Marines who showed up 11 centuries too late to save the empire, and don't actually know if that's what they're here to do.
Here's the deal we're testing. Full modern loadout. No resupply after the first 96 hours. Dropped inside the city the night before the final assault. Survival tier S through F on every engagement. A running casualty counter that does not forgive. And I'll tell you the twist up front so you're watching for it. The walls aren't the problem. The gate is. Hold on to that. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. Does Constantinople still fall on schedule? Or does history actually move?
Phase 1. The Wall at Night. The insertion happens through the Golden Horn, the sheltered inlet on the city's north side. The same water Mehmed II will famously portage his ships around by land a few weeks earlier in our real timeline. An engineering stunt that's already happened by the time this drop occurs. 2 platoons, roughly 90 Marines, come ashore near the Blockernise section of the wall after midnight. The remaining 4 stages inside the city with the Byzantine garrison itself, which by this point in the siege numbers only around 7,000 defenders, holding roughly 4 miles of fortification. That ratio is the whole tragedy of 1453 in one sentence, and it's the reason the city falls in our timeline no matter how good the walls are. And the walls really are good. The Theodosian system isn't one wall, it's 3. An outer moat, a low outer wall, and an inner wall standing close to 40 feet, with towers every 55 meters. For 1,000 years, that geometry made Constantinople effectively unconquerable by direct assault. What breaks it in 1453 isn't tactics. It's a Hungarian engineer named Orban, and a bronze cannon called the Basilica, firing stone shot reportedly over 600 pounds. That gun doesn't need clever siegecraft, it just needs time. And by late May, it's had 2 months of it, pounding a single stretch of wall near the Mesotheikion into rubble. So here's the actual mission the Marines walk into. Not defend the wall, because the wall is already failing in a spot artillery has been chewing since April. The mission is to hold the breach itself, the one the entire Ottoman final assault is designed to pour through. They set up a javelin team and 2 M240 positions inside the rubble slope of the breach, with a squad of designated marksmen on the surviving wall stubs to either side. Night vision against an army that has none turns the dark into the single biggest advantage this force will ever hold. First contact comes from an Ottoman probing unit sent to test the breach before the main assault. Several hundred irregulars, the Bashi bazooks, sent in specifically because Ottoman commanders consider them expendable, a detail history isn't shy about at all. They walk into suppressed, thermally sighted fire in pitch dark and simply cannot process what's killing them. No muzzle flash they can orient on, no formation to charge, just men dropping in silence. Survival tier for this phase? A. 0 Marine casualties. Byzantine garrison holding the flanks rates B, stiffened considerably by having a modern unit anchor their worst weak point for the first time in 2 months. Ottoman probing force is effectively destroyed, an estimated 300 to 500 casualties in under 20 minutes. But, and this is the part that should worry you, that engagement just told Mehmed's entire command staff that his main breach point has something new and lethal defending it. He has 2 more waves planned for tonight regardless, and a fleet in the Horn that hasn't fired a shot yet.
Phase 2. The Wave Attack. Here's where I need you to slow down with me, because the numbers in this phase are the whole video. Mehmed's assault doctrine for the night of May 29th is documented, and it's brutal in its simplicity. Irregulars first, to exhaust the defenders and burn through their ammunition and energy. Then the regular Anatolian troops, and only after both of those are spent, the Janissaries, His elite standing infantry corps, the best trained soldiers in his empire, held back specifically so they hit a defense that's already bled out. The Marines' basic load carries roughly 210 rounds of 5.56 per rifleman, plus belted 7.62 for the 240s. Enough for sustained engagement, not for an entire night against 3 consecutive waves numbering in the tens of thousands. This is the ammunition math nobody wants to say out loud. 90 Marines cannot outshoot 80,000 men no matter how good the rifles are. What they can do is hold one specific piece of geography long enough for it to matter, and then they have to get creative.
The second wave, Anatolian regulars, several thousand strong, hits the breach at dawn. The M240s cut lanes through the front ranks, and for a while it looks like Phase 1 all over again. Except the bodies from the first wave are now cover for the second, and Ottoman commanders start pushing troops around the flanks of the breach rather than straight through it, onto sections of wall the Byzantine garrison alone is holding. This is the moment the math turns. Every Marine gun tube pointed at the breach is a gun tube not covering the flank, and the flank is where 600 years of siege warfare says you're supposed to attack anyway.
A Byzantine officer named Giovanni Giustiniani, a real Genoese condottieri who commanded the defense of this exact section and was wounded in the actual historical assault, takes a crossbow bolt through his breastplate almost on schedule with the real timeline. In our history, his wounding and evacuation is one of the events historians point to as breaking Byzantine morale at the critical moment. Here, a Marine corpsman gets to him in under 2 minutes with trauma care no 15th century wound has ever survived. He doesn't die. He doesn't leave the wall. That single medical intervention is arguably the biggest strategic swing of the entire operation, and it costs 0 rounds of ammunition. Survival tier. Marine breach team holds at B+. Ammunition reserves now under 50% with 2 waves still to come. Byzantine flank defense rates C, taking real losses without a modern unit to anchor them. Casualty counter. 6 Marines wounded, none killed. Byzantine losses across the wall estimated at 200 to 400. Ottoman second wave losses run 1,500 to 2,500. Catastrophic by the standards of the era, survivable by the standards of an 80,000-man army. Then, the horns change pitch. That's the Janissary signal.
And everyone on that wall who's read anything about this siege knows what's coming next.
Phase 3, the Janissaries and the Cercaporta. I know this is starting to sound like a clean, modern tech curb stomp, and I'd ask you to stay, because this next beat is the one the whole scenario turns on, and it's not the Janissaries. The Janissary assault is genuinely dangerous, disciplined, drilled, advancing in organized formation rather than the ragged charges of the earlier waves, which actually makes them easier for the 240 gunners to predict, and worse for them tactically. One of those grim ironies where the more professional army walks straight into the kind of fire modern infantry weapons are specifically built to punish. The breach holds. Barely, but it holds. And by any reasonable measure, this falls should be the climax.
It isn't, because roughly a mile north along the wall, at a small postern gate called the Cercaporta, something happens that has nothing to do with either army's plan. In the real historical siege, this gate was left unlocked or improperly secured during the fighting. Accounts differ on exactly how. And a party of Ottoman troops found it open and slipped inside the walls almost by accident, at almost the exact moment Giustiniani's wounding was breaking morale on the main line. It's one of the great what-ifs of the whole battle. Not a tactical masterstroke, a door someone forgot to lock. Here's the twist. The Marine force wasn't briefed on the Cercaporta because there were 200 of them defending a 4-mile wall, and nobody can be everywhere. The gate is exactly as unlocked as it was the first time. And this time, there's no random chance saving the city, because the outcome was never in the Marines' hands to begin with. It was a door in a wall that nobody with a rifle was standing next to. By the time word reaches the breach that Ottoman troops are inside the city proper, it's already too late to seal it. This is the myth worth correcting here. People assume a technological edge means controlling the whole battlefield. It doesn't. It means winning the fights you show up to.
The Cerca was never a fight. It was a gap, and 200 men, however armed, cannot personally cover 11 centuries of wall. Survival tier? Marine breach team. Still holding their sector? Rates A for the engagement they were actually fighting. Citywide situation? Rates F the moment the Cerca falls, because the wall is no longer the deciding terrain. The interior of the city is. Casualty counter? 9 Marines wounded, 1 killed pulling a Byzantine soldier out of a collapsing tower section. Ottoman third wave losses at the main breach? 1,000 to 1,800. None of it matters anymore.
Phase 4, the city. The fighting inside Constantinople's streets is the part every version of this siege glosses over, and it's also where the Marines' advantages shrink fastest. Dense, unfamiliar medieval streets nobody has a map for. Civilians in the path of everything. Radios eating through a battery reserve nobody planned to need this hard. The unit that anchored the breach for 6 hours pulls back into the city to try to slow the collapse rather than stop it, which is a different mission, with a different ceiling on what victory even means.
They don't retake the Cerca. They don't need to try. By the time they're informed, Ottoman troops are already flowing through the Adrianople Gate as well, which historical accounts describe as being thrown open from the inside once the wall's defense broke. A second entry point that has nothing to do with rifles or walls, and everything to do with a city whose garrison was always 4 times too small for the ground it had to cover. What the Marines do instead is run a fighting withdrawal through the Mace, the city's main thoroughfare, buying time for as many civilians and defenders as possible to reach the harbor, where ships are already loading.
Survival tier. Urban withdrawal element rates C+. Effective, disciplined, and completely unable to change the shape of the outcome. Casualty counter final. 3 Marines killed, 14 wounded out of the original 200. Byzantine military and civilian losses in the sack that follows are estimated by historians in the low thousands, a number this intervention meaningfully reduces without coming close to eliminating.
This sim doesn't produce a save, it produces a better death toll and the same headline. Constantinople still falls on May 29, 1453. Mehmed II still becomes the conqueror. The Byzantine Empire, 11 centuries old, still ends. What changes is how many people walk out of it alive, and that a Genoese commander who historically died of his wound gets to see the following morning instead. 200 rifles couldn't hold 4 miles of wall. A garrison of 7,000 couldn't hold either. The lesson isn't that modern weapons don't matter. It's that the thing that actually decided this siege was never firepower on either side. It was a door somebody forgot to lock, on a wall too long for any force, ancient or modern, to watch every inch of it once. Winning your fight and winning the war turned out to be 2 different assignments, and this unit only ever had the first one. Did they save the city? Or just make sure fewer people had to watch it fall? Drop your verdict in the comments. Subscribe? Next time the door doesn't open, and we find out if that's actually enough.